welcoming our friend Stephen Yates, and he's very generous with his time. He joins us most Mondays. Senior Fellow at America First Policy Institute, Chair of the China Policy Initiative. I mean, I don't. I think that seems. I want to ask. I want to talk to you about some of the economy stuff, but I think that especially with the. Let me pull this up because it was a Guardian. There was a Guardian piece, a Wall Street Journal piece, that got into how this, the ban that Biden implemented is not. It's nothing, and that's why Beijing hasn't responded, because normally if you blink at them the wrong way, they scream. But there's been crickets on this.
Yeah, well, this is one of those cases where I think Congressman Gallagher, who heads the Select Committee on Competition with the Chinese Communist Party, he had it summed up exactly right. I mean, basically, has so many loopholes that are so big that you could basically fly a squadron of PLA aircraft or some PLA Navy vessels through them. I mean, basically, you have to have kind of this majority owned company that is majority involved in artificial intelligence. And so you put so many caveats on it. And the arbiter for it is the Department of Treasury, who has been instructed to consult with other people and come up with maybe some rules one day in the future. So anybody who's spent time in government, and they have my sympathies if they have, you'd know that anytime you try to do something tough, if you put the Department of Treasury in charge, it means go forth with China. Because that is the place that is the most pro-engagement of all of the agencies of the U.S. government. Occasionally there'll be outlier people in there, but this was basically just for show, because even the Biden administration knows right now the American people aren't having it when it comes to the happy talk about engagement that most recently Secretary Yellen was trying to sell when she went to Beijing and bowed multiple times to the emperor.
And also indicating that our economies are so intertwined, it's impossible to undo that mess. Which, not impossible, but just long and painstaking, and there are sacrifices people would have to make economically and with cheap goods that they don't want to.
Right. Well, the great senator from Louisiana, who has the beautiful gift of words, put it exactly right. They came into the World Trade Organization on day one, and on day two they began cheating. And the sin, in my view, isn't on trying to do things to let them show what their true colors are. The sin is in refusing to see their true colors by the results decades later. Obviously, it was a mistake then. We're paying for it now. But, 30 years ago, China wasn't the manufacturing platform for the world. And so we could move that if we had the will. As you allude to, it's definitely true. It wouldn't be free, but it wasn't free for us to move all that manufacturing from others to China. I mean, it cost our own manufacturing. It cost our allies' manufacturing. I mean, there were costs, and now it just proved to be a bad bet, and we need to undo it.
Yeah, we need to undo it, but the political will doesn't seem to be there. Everybody wants to do it's that immediate, instant gratification, and people, not just in commerce, but also in policy. People want that. They want immediate gratification, and it's ruined everything. With China's economy, so we talked a little bit about this last week. It's not doing well, but I like the new spin that, well, it's slow, but it's healthy.
Yeah, well, all those gold medals that go to people who are running slowly but healthily to the finish line, I mean, just begs you to ignore what your eyes see and what your ears hear. There obviously are structural problems inside China. They have a property bubble that is quite significant. They've had massive problems in their workforce. They have lots and lots of other things that we should not be shocked to find, that communism is not actually a viable economic strategy. It was the sugar high of us pouring money and privileged access in there that brought about the hyper growth that they experienced. And now that they began to strategically decouple and they've started to have floods and other problems, they're having the economic problems. We shouldn't be shocked by it, but even still, we'll still have some green eye shades people in Wall Street that want to say, "Oh yeah, but it's healthy. It's a healthy contraction."
Yeah, I love this sentence. I think that I read this over at Bloomberg, which I don't like the title of that news entity, but that's what it is. Beijing. Some say Beijing is engaged in a vibes-based stimulus.
There's so many problems with that phrase, but I just can't. I mean, I never knew that emotion and vibes had anything to do with trying to get to the truth about what's happening in an economy. I didn't know, maybe we got to go to the right psychic and read the right crystal ball to get this stuff right. But, really, the evidence is pretty clear. Everyone that has been majorly invested in China is having a wake-up call and is trying to find ways to healthily de-risk, I think, is the safe term to use, because decoupling is apparently too shocking for some people. But they've got to find a way to do business elsewhere, and it's not about us being nice or mean. The Chinese leadership has made these choices. It's not a hospitable place. I mean, if you can get locked up for wrongthink, it's bad enough to get locked up in the U.S. system, but go ahead and give it a try in one of these commie systems. That's a whole different picnic.
Looking at who also China dislikes, Taiwan. I think it's the VP, Taiwan's vice president and presidential candidate, William Lai, is traveling through the United States. He's been called by China, quote, a troublemaker through and through, which honestly, I think I would have that as like my campaign slogan. He's arrived in New York Saturday. He's en route to Paraguay. He's going to attend the inauguration of their president, which is apparently their only diplomatic ally in South America. And so the CCP, they're very upset about this, and they've been voicing their discontentment over Lai's stubborn separatist position, I think is how they described it, saying that China deplores and strongly condemns the decision to arrange this so-called stopover. That was their statement.
Well, I would love it. I still think most of the world should run by way of stand-up comedy when they're faced with ridiculous things coming their way. But Tom Segura has an excellent routine where when he is protested by a particular group and they call him a sinner, he just puts his thumb up and says, yes. And when William Lai is called all these things by Beijing, he should just smile at the camera and say, yes.
That's the way to do it.
That they even try to throw this weird kind of pejorative language in his direction. So the United States, we should blame ourselves for this sort of stupid acting game. We won't allow this to be called a visit because we don't have formal diplomatic relations. So we call it a transit because that's completely different from a visit. I mean, you still land at an airport, you go to a hotel, you overnight, you speak to supporters, but you haven't visited. You've just transited because you're going to an inauguration in Central America. Cool beans. So this is the game that we've played. I think that by bending ourselves into a pretzel, Beijing has already extracted our manhood from us. And so at this point, they don't really need to protest too much. So they'll hit William Lai, but when they call him a sinner and they call him a splittist and all this other fun stuff, he should just smile, put his thumb in the air and say, yes.
Yes. That's a campaign ad. Yeah, I don't understand the language, how they, what you were just talking about. Who are they, honestly, who are they trying to convince with this language? Like these, I understand that we have this policy of vagary for the recognition of Taiwan, but it's a visit. It's not a stopover. It's not a transit. It's a visit. I mean, are there people actually out there that we're trying to convince, what? Well, they called it a stopover. It's not a visit. So they're being respectful. Or looking at China. I mean, are they? I just don't understand why. We all recognize that they're trying to force this entity that's never actually technically been like a full part of China to be part of China. We all recognize what's at core here. Why in the world are we still? I'm just tired of having to go along with the Victorian freak show theater of pretending on this stuff. We know where everything is.
No, I completely agree. I mean, basically, I don't know why we couldn't find the wherewithal to just say when someone wants to complain about something like this, we're America and we'll choose. I hope
we'll do what we want.
Who can come and go to our country.
Yeah.
That doesn't make them a country or not a country. You guys sort that crap out.
Right.
But if we're going to choose whether someone's going to come through our country and they cause problems while we're here, then they don't get to come back. But you know what? You're not going to tell us who we can and can't have come to our country. And if we told you who could come and go to your country, you'd give us the Chinese version of a particular finger. So we're all good, aren't we?
It makes me think of like somebody getting upset because someone stopped at your house. They visited you. No, it wasn't a visit. It was a stopover. It was a transit. The bus stops right there. It There's a transit, or their Uber pickup area was, right at the end of my drive. That's where, it was just a transit. It was just a temporary thing. I mean, I thought, in addition to "Don't Tread on Me," and "E Pluribus Unum," that one of our mottos was "We do what we want," right? I mean, that's, it seems to be ingrained. We'll call it whatever we want to call it. Get your stuff together. Quit being a bully. It just demonstrates such weakness. But Republicans have done it, though, too, Stephen. They have done it, too.
Absolutely. No, this has been bipartisan establishment weakness for a long, long time.
What's the worst that happens if we say it's a visit? What's the worst that happens?
Oh, I think we just get an angrier letter. I mean, really, we've already been poisoned by COVID. We're currently being poisoned by fentanyl. We've already had unfair trade and unfair access that has stolen trillions of dollars from our economy. And they've invested our money that we transferred to them into a military that now wants to threaten and spy on us and
With
everybody
balloons.
else. So really, if we're just going to tell the truth about, someone's going to come for a visit, and if you don't like it, oh well. Write me one of those letters. I'll put it in the angry letter file and get back to you in due course. That's all that can and should happen. And if they're going to cause a war over something like this, then they're going to cause a war over something anyway.
Yeah.
You're not getting off the hook because you bow to their rules.
That's a really good point. I mean, if you're really just looking to stop some kind of conflict, if they're going to start it over something as stupid as that, that's a very good point. Stephen Yates at YatesComms on Twitter. Always appreciate it. I hope you have a good rest of your week, my friend. Thank you.
You got it. Thank you very
Of
much,
course.
Dana. Take care.